Grateful tonight to welcome Miss Gena Thomas, come in from Chattanooga today to be with us. Gena is the author of a new book, Separated by the Border, from IVP Books. Gena has told the story of a young 5-year-old migrant child named Julia, separated from her family at the border while immigrating from Honduras, woven into her own experience. We're grateful to have you here with us. Please welcome Gena Thomas.
It's great to be here.
Let's try again. Check. Gena, tell us a little bit about, before you tell us about Julia's story, tell us a little bit about how your own family got involved in foster care.
Yeah, so my husband and I, we were missionaries in northern Mexico for about 4.5 years. While we were there, we tried to adopt. Doors were closed, and I'm actually very grateful for that. I learned a lot about international adoption while there, and just really felt like it was easier for us to care about kids from other countries than to care about those from our own home in our own country. And so when we returned back to the United States, we began the process to be foster parents. And so in October of 2017, we became foster parents in our county in North Carolina.
We have a lot of folks care a lot about that in the room tonight with our sponsor Agape and others here tonight. How then did your experience with foster care intersect with your family getting involved in immigration issues?
So then in February of 2018, we got a call from a social worker asking us if we would be interested in, just for the weekend, taking in a little girl who only speaks Spanish. At the time, both my husband and I spoke Spanish, and our son, who was born in Mexico, also spoke Spanish. And so we decided, yeah, we can do this for a weekend. We had another foster daughter in our home at the time, and it was a lot to have 2 foster kids in our home because we had that previously. But we thought, if it's only a weekend, we can handle this. But then on Monday, when the federal agencies were supposed to arrive at court, they didn't arrive, and so it turned into a long-term placement. This little girl was from Honduras, and she initially had come up from Honduras with her biological mother and her stepdad. And she was first separated from her biological mother from the smugglers that they paid $7,500 to in order to get them from Honduras into the United States. The smugglers decided that the mom was economic gain for them and prostituted her out, and then decided to keep her when it was time to release them to go to the border. And so the stepdad and the little girl, she was 5 at the time, came over into the United States, and then they were separated, most likely because of zero tolerance policy, but that's a little bit unclear because we don't have a lot of paperwork from that time. So then she went into a sponsorship family. Once children come across the border, they're called unaccompanied minors, and then they go into Office of Refugee Resettlement. So she was then resettled with her stepdad's sister in the North Carolina area where we're from, and then that family neglected her, and she ended up in our home. So that's how all of that happened.
And then, so she's in your home. How did she begin, or did she begin to reconnect with her own family at some point?
Yeah, so then about 10 days into being in our home, we were able to make contact with her mom, who had since escaped from the smugglers and returned back to Honduras. And then it was very clear right away that this mom was safe and wanted to be with her daughter, that this was a big injustice that had happened. And so we worked then with social workers and with the Honduran consulate to get all the paperwork aligned for them to be reunited. So in July of 2018, and again, this is all happening while zero tolerance policy is happening. So in July of 2018, my husband and I were able to fly back to Honduras with her and reunite her with her mom and her brothers.
Now, in your book, Separated by the Border, you've written this book to tell these stories and to draw attention to the issues of immigration. But it seems to me that you're wanting to try to showcase, seems to me, the humanity behind it, not just the social policy, but the humanity behind it. Why is that important to you?
Well, as a Christian, I really do believe that we are all imprinted with the divine imprint. We are all received dignity from that imprint, and therefore, as Christians, we need to be on the forefront of fighting for that dignity for other human beings. regardless of what area of life it's in. And so for us, this was really important to make sure that we were recognizing the humanity of this woman, of her child, and just the family as a whole, and not just the child. I think that's one thing that we can do incorrectly when it comes to foster and adoption. And so it was really important for me to recognize, A, this is not something that we do typically, and B, this is something that we really need to do, especially when we're talking about immigration. We're talking about human beings' lives, and the difficult decisions that they have to make in order to come here, whether it's legal or illegal. It's a very difficult decision to make. None of us wants to leave our home being forced to leave it for economic oppression or for gang violence or threats of any kind. So to try to be more imaginative of what that could be like in that situation for someone else is really important.
You begin to note this. Obviously, immigration is a very complex issue, very complex social policy and so forth. But one common refrain that one might hear around issues of immigration is that you hear good-hearted people who will say, look, it's fine if folks want to come here, but they just need to get in line and follow the rules and the procedures. So what would you say to that kind of refrain?
Well, there's a lot of different lines, first of all, and some of them are 20 years long. And for some people, the economic oppression or the violent oppression that is coming upon them gives them no time to sit for 20 years and wait to get in line. So I think, again, it's so important to understand there are actual real reasons that are pushing people up from different countries, especially in Central America, and we need to really think about what those reasons are and if our lines are actually lines and what we need to do to make that change.
As you close out, tell us one or two practical, pragmatic things that we can do to welcome immigrants ourselves.
Yeah, I think one of the big things is making friends with immigrants who are in your community. Our United States is full of immigrants from all over the world, and it's really important that we don't just push them away or not try to be friends with them. I think that's a huge thing. On top of that, I think we need to read more books by immigrants and about immigration so that we can be more learned and more understanding about it all. And then finally, I will say, please, please, please talk to your representatives, whether you agree with them politically or not. Send them messages, emails, text messages, texts, tweets, whatever you can, get through to them. Make sure you're leaving a voicemail so that they know that their constituents think a certain way, especially right now with DACA. Please call them about that.
Gena Thomas, Separated by the Border. Thank you, Gena.